Show. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It's Wednesday, April 24th, 2013. Hump Day, middle of the weekday, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday. And another, hopefully, relaxing weekend. I don't know about after the last 10 days that we've been dealing with all of this insanity going on here. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Manny is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. If, excuse me, if you were having a little bit of difficulty reaching whatreallyhappened.com earlier today, we did get hit with a denial of service attack coming out of Kansas City, someplace around there. And apparently I'm getting word now that somebody is spamming the net with some very offensive email that purports to come from my website, my email address. So if you get something that just is over the top and nonsense, you know that it's just part of this hacker attack. Obviously, somebody is very unhappy with our reporting on recent events, like Boston, and we're about to make them a little bit unhappier still. Yesterday, Sibel Edmonds, former FBI employee, came out with an interview on Russia Today, saying the same thing that Ryan Dawson and I had been saying on yesterday's show, that the pattern of FBI contacts with the Tsarnaev brothers matches that of an FBI recruitment and use as informants, infiltrators. And so it's beginning to look like these two guys, the reason they were traveling to Russia and they were getting involved in all these people is they were being used as intelligence assets. They loved their new country, the United States of America. People from that part of the world would be extremely valuable to the FBI and the CIA, and they would have been approached. I got approached by CIA when I was back at CBS Television City. I told them no, because I was not at all impressed with them. But it is a classic pattern. And when you have the realization that the FBI was in contact with these brothers, especially the older one, going back up to 5 years ago, yeah, it does seem like they've been involved with the nation's intelligence agencies. The mother referred to it as counseling by the FBI. Now, that may be a translation error coming in from the native language to English. Counseling, the FBI is not known for counseling people, but they are known for recruiting informants and infiltrators. Remember the Oklahoma City bombing, and there was all that focus on Elohim City, this radical Christian bunch of, you know, being demonized in the press. And it came out in Carol Howe's trial that the founder and manager of Elohim City was an FBI informant. So they have them all over the place here. I had a very good friend in college who was an FBI informant up to the day he tried to recruit me, following that whole Disneyland riot situation. So they're all over the place. If you are going to a college today, I guarantee you, some of those people walking around you are FBI informants. They're usually the smelly kids who can get the dynamite or are trying to talk you into blowing something up. But they infiltrate. My friend, when he was trying to recruit me, was saying, oh, I infiltrated the Gay Students Union and the Christians Students Group. And, you know, they were always trying to be around, involved in everything. And that's one of the dead giveaways that they're informants, because they're being used for every possible intelligence gathering operation. So Sibel Edmonds is up there saying this fits the classic pattern. Of course, we have the story coming out of Boston's Channel 4 News. They were following up with the FBI about reports from the parents that the FBI had called these suspects before the fatal final shootout. And the FBI refused to either confirm or deny the existence of the phone call. In other words, it's a non-denial denial. We will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about what's going on with the aftermath of Boston. Of course, the corporate media, this is all they're reporting about. Little mention about the sequestration is messing up airline travel. No mentions, of course, about that fertilizer plant explosion down in Texas that killed a lot more people, damaged a lot more property than Boston. It's all Boston all the time. We've got to get the message out that there are evil people out there that we must kill because they're going to come kill us. Same thing we've been hearing all along with, going back to, even going back to World War II, the Japanese, or, Hitler pulled with Gleiwitz, the Poles are coming to get us, we must kill them first here. Now, a great deal of media focus has been on these pressure cooker bombs. How did these people learn to make these things? Oh, it had to be from Al-Qaeda. And now the story is that the Tamerlan got a whole bunch of fireworks, $200 worth of fireworks from this store in New Hampshire, for which he paid cash, which begs the question, how do they know who bought the fireworks? And by the way, if you live in New Hampshire, fireworks are, still something that's part of the life there. When I lived in New Hampshire, I bought fireworks. And by the way, interesting coincidence, it's the same exact fireworks store that supposedly provided the explosives for the Times Square bombing. Little bit of an overlap on that. But they're making a big deal about this supposed English language magazine called Inspire that is published by Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Ooh, it's Al-Qaeda. See, it's the Muslims. You got to blame the Muslims. They're sending this information to America on how to make bombs. Well, their 10th edition of this supposed Al-Qaeda English language magazine features, not just reports on, not just quotes, not just a little picture, features, main story, Adam Gadon. Now, for those of you who have not been following along or taking notes, Adam Gadon is a phony. He's promoted in the corporate media as the American Al-Qaeda, the media maven of Al-Qaeda. He's an evil person. He's always making these videos saying, if you don't do what Al-Qaeda says, we're going to come and kill you. And he's a complete phony. His real name is Adam Perlman. He is the grandson of a founding member of the Anti-Defamation League. He's a phony. Just like, remember, Yusuf al-Khattab, who had the Revolution Muslim website in Brooklyn, New York. His real name was Joseph Cohen. Remember Amzi al-Amrika, the Muslim who threatened the South Park production team. His real name is Zachary Chesser. They're all fakes and phonies. And so if this Al-Qaeda magazine, Inspire, is featuring this phony, and even the corporate media was forced to admit, actually he's really Jewish, but he changed, really. He changed. He's evil now. You should be afraid of him. So if this Inspire magazine is featuring this known phony on their cover, then Inspire itself is a propaganda hoax. It's in English. It's sent to America to sell you on the idea, oh, there's an evil Al-Qaeda out there. The editor-in-chief is probably Emmanuel Goldstein, for all we know. For you 1984 George Orwell fans. So it's all a gigantic hoax and a fake. Inspire is a fake. It isn't really being put out by Muslim extremists. It's just another propaganda trick, just like Adam Gadon himself. Adam Perlman, I'm sorry, that's his real name. And so you're starting to ask, who's behind all these Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, Al-Qaeda in Iran? And apparently, there's more and more information surfacing. Al-Qaeda in Iran is funded by the United States government through these various NGOs, like USAID, which is a known CIA front. And remember, we were talking the other day about this uncle who's getting all this media exposure. He's saying, oh, the kids were radicalized by this evil Muslim, blah, blah, blah. Turns out he was a consultant for USAID, which means he's a CIA asset. And now we're getting this story out of B4in.info that this so-called Russian bin Laden, that they're trying to say, oh, see, Russia bin Laden, the Russians are evil, we've got to go out there. Turns out they're also linked financially with the Central Intelligence Agency. This is a very, very old scam they're pulling on you. It's been done throughout history. A government will create an enemy with which to scare you. All the way back in Rome, Marcus Licinius Crassus, richest man in Rome, probably the richest man on earth at the time. Absolute total money junkie. He invented the fire department, but not as we have it today where it's a public utility. He would have wagons with firefighting equipment and slaves stationed throughout Rome. And when a fire broke out, he would take one of his wagons and he'd rush down there and he'd offer to buy the building for pennies on the dollar. And if the owner would sell, he'd have, Marcus Licinius Crassus would have his slaves put the fire out. And he'd have an almost brand new building on the cheap. If the owner refused to sell the building, Marcus Licinius Crassus would just let it burn to the ground. This is one of the ways he became very wealthy. And when he decided he wanted to be first consul of Rome, he used the Spartacus slave revolt to scare the Roman people. He was out there saying, Spartacus slave army, they're marching on Rome. I need extraordinary powers and authority over and above the Senate to save you all from horror. And of course, Spartacus was trying to get the heck out of Italy. They were trying to find somebody who was going to get them out of there. They wanted to go home. These were all foreign captured slaves. They wanted to go home. They were not marching on Rome. And Marcus Licinius Crassus just propagandized them up as this horrible army that was marching on Rome itself, and he was granted these extraordinary powers, which was the first step in the transition from Rome as a republic to Rome under the heel of the emperors. So this stuff gets done time and time again throughout history. It is an ancient, ancient scam, and they're doing it again. They're doing it again. Go out through CIA and the NGOs and find somebody who's basically trying to grab a little bit of attention, media coverage, and you turn them into a big, horrible monster, and you wave them at the American people. Same thing with Osama bin Laden, whose CIA code name was Tim Osman. Remember, the bin Laden family have reason to be very friendly with the United States of America. Bin Laden Construction, still to this very day, gets these gigantic government contracts for construction all across the Middle East. Osama bin Laden's older brother, Salim bin Laden, was business partners with George W. Bush in a company called Arbusto Energy. Does that sound like this whole radicalized Muslim whatever? Osama bin Laden was kind of a nothing, goofing around, driving cars, enjoying his wealth, grabbing the girls. And then all of a sudden they said, we need you to go into Afghanistan and become our controlled figurehead for the Mujahideen to drive out the Soviet Union. And that's when he became Osama bin Laden. And he was already dying when he was approached by the CIA at the American hospital in Riyadh in July of 2001. And he'd already been accused of all these bombings in Spain and everything else, and CIA walked in, talked to him. We don't know what they said, but they didn't arrest him or anything. They just walked on out. I think we can surmise they said, Osama, buddy, it's your lucky day. We know you're going to be dead in a couple of months, but boy, are we going to make you have your place in the history book. You're going to be the ultimate villain here. We're going to blow up the World Trade Towers, and we're going to blame the Arab Muslims, and you're going to be our uber villain that will be in the media and the history books. And Osama said, well, I'm dying anyway. What the heck? So that's what they're doing. They create the villains with which to scare you. Again, going back to Adolf Hitler and the attack on the Gleiwitz radio station, he created the Poles as a villain about to invade in order to launch the invasion of Poland. That's how these warmongering money junkies get these things going. They create the illusion of a threat. All the way back in The Art of War by Sun Tzu, he said, all war is based on deception. And what he meant by that was, when somebody decides they want to start a war, they have to lie and trick their own people into it, because ordinary people don't want to go to war. War is not fun, despite what the video games and movies and TV show you. It's very hard, difficult, dangerous work. It doesn't pay anywhere near what it's really worth. And the only way you will get people to leave their homes and families and travel halfway around the globe carrying heavy equipment that usually doesn't work, I might add, is you have to say, oh, if we don't get them now, bad things will happen. And the lies will change, but the fact of the lie stays the same. During the Crusades, if you will go over to the Holy Lands and whack those people on the head and steal their wealth and give us control of those very valuable trade routes, we will forgive all of your sins, anything bad you ever did in life, and you will get to go to heaven. Talk about a cost-effective scam on that one. So that is what this history is all about. All wars are started by a leader or leaders who lie and trick their people into the war. Because otherwise, who would really go? Can you imagine some president standing up there and saying, we're going to invade Latvia just because, well, they got some oil over there and they got some gold and silver and molybdenum, and we just feel like we want to take it over. Who would sign up for that? Nobody would sign up for that. So they have to get up there and say, oh, there's a danger. The Latvians are coming to attack us. For your movie list, you ought to look at Wag the Dog, which came out during the Clinton years. There are even some veiled references to Clinton within the movie itself. And it's a comedy, and it's a very well-made movie, but it does show how all of this government policy is just little more than public relations, which is a fancy name for lying to the people. Going to take a break. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors.
Liberating audio.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. So we're talking about all of the obvious propaganda that is coming out. And so it is, about the Boston bombers and trying to demonize them. Because if you go back and you look at Tamerlan, the older brother, if you look at his real life, this is not somebody who fits the pattern of an angry Islamic fanatic. They're trying to rebrand him, and it just doesn't work. Martial artist, accomplished martial artist, Golden Gloves fighter, was going to try out for the U.S. Olympic team. Very successful, scholarship-winning student star athlete, lovely wife. And they're trying to demonize him any way that they can. And so there's this interesting article that came out of Forward, which is, of course, a very pro-Jewish website. Slain Boston bomb suspect tried to obtain infamous anti-Semitic tract. And they're going on and on about how Tamerlan was telling his friends and neighbors and relatives he was trying to find a copy of the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. Ooh, bad. Clearly he was an anti-Semite for looking at that. Or even for looking for it, he's an anti-Semite. Well, it's a very obvious smear tactic to try and rebrand Tamerlan as evil after he's dead and cannot speak for himself. And, of course, for Israel to try and maximize the political gain they can get from Boston. They're already out there saying, oh, yes, Boston will build sympathy for Israel. No, it won't. Fool me once on that one. I'll tell you why. Huffington Post and Associated Press are already out there claiming that Tamerlan was inspired by political websites like INFOWARS, and I'm not listed by name, but they probably include me in the list. And so Tamerlan was obviously familiar with computers and the Internet. Had he really wanted to find the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, there are many copies online. It took me less than 30 seconds to find one. So there was no reason for him to go out and say, oh, I'm looking for the Protocols. I need to find, where can I find, oh, I want to find the Protocols. It's nonsense. If he was curious about them, it would have taken him 30 seconds to find it. It's just another piece of smear propaganda. Now, we're seeing another story coming out of Washington's blog on how these two brothers were on the terrorist watch lists, which proves they don't work, doesn't it? Russia is saying they contacted the United States multiple times, making inquiries about these two brothers after they were traveling back and forth from the U.S. to Russia and the various Russian republics. And they're saying, oh, this raises, who dropped the ball? You know what? Where was there was no failure. The obvious explanation is these two brothers were U.S. intelligence assets, not unlike Lee Harvey Oswald. Remember, he got sent to Russia, pretended to be a defector. Then he came right back to the United States, no investigation. The U.S. government issues him a passport, gives him money to travel, gets him back home. This is a guy who defected to the Soviet Union. And he's welcomed back to the United States with open arms. It doesn't get more obvious than that. And then, of course, they threw Lee Harvey Oswald's life away as part of another government plot to assassinate President John F. Kennedy. And these two brothers are looking exactly the same. And by the way, for those of you listening to this show, and I know there's a few of you from all these ridiculous votes on the polls that always support the official government position, so I know some of you out there are spooks that work for the government. Take a lesson from this. Do not think for a second that the people you are working for have any sense of loyalty toward you, that they will protect you, they will take care of you. Learn from Lee Harvey Oswald, learn from these two brothers in Boston. they will send you to your death the moment they think they can get some gain out of it. Something to keep you up tonight when you're trying to sleep after all the nefarious things you've been doing. Now, there's another story circulating. They're trying to hammer home the point. Oh, they were Muslims. They went to mosques. They went to mosques. They went to mosques. Blah, 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 blah. And a story came out earlier today where the leader of this mosque where this older brother was seen was always having to tell him to be quiet, to be silent. Well, first of all, that's not a devout Muslim to go into a mosque and cause a ruckus. This is an operative trying to attract attention to themselves so they will be remembered later on. Remember the night before 9/11 in New York City, a bunch of Muslims, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, were making the rounds of various bars and strip joints, again, not very devout Muslims, and they were making a huge ruckus about tomorrow you will see the vengeance of Mohammed, blah, 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 even conveniently leaving their driver's licenses in the bar to be discovered afterwards. And then it turned out, of course, all these IDs were fakes, very well-made fakes, but the FBI said, yeah, they're fakes. They were there to attract attention, to pre-sell who you will blame when the big bang happens. And this idea of Tamerlan going into a mosque and making a ruckus so that he would be remembered reeks of exactly the same thing. I'm going to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Erica, welcome back to the show. We're going to grab a phone call here. Gerhardt in Pennsylvania. Aloha, Gerhardt. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. How are you today?
Doing good.
Very good, sir. Thank you. I'm calling in regards to a article in the Washington Post on Saturday, April 20th, page 9. Mm-hmm. And it refers to, it's a half-page article, it refers to facial recognition and the fact that it was employed in the state of Massachusetts, okay, one of 30 states that employs facial recognition for Bureau of Motor Vehicles. Well, if one of the suspects had a driver's license, which the article claims,
yes,
there were visas issued, passports, Facebook entries, college IDs. It seems a little bit strange that this wasn't employed when they released the photos late Thursday afternoon.
It is good that you spotted that, because we know from the fact that the FBI was already calling these guys before the manhunt went out there. It's obvious they knew who these individuals were. The whole reason to put out their photos all over the media was to sell America. These are the bad guys. Pay no attention to the guys in black and tan. Pay no attention to all the other things. Just look at these two people and hate them because they're Muslims.
Now, if we back up again to this point in time, if this was employed and they determined the identity, I'm sure they could have grabbed these two guys off the street, brought them in, questioned them to see what was going on. But no, what happened? They released the photos. There was a carjacking. There was an ATM situation. There was an alleged 7-Eleven robbery. There was a wild shootout. One suspect is killed. The other one escapes. It was a day-wide manhunt with 6,000 city, state, county, federal law enforcement agencies involved and employees. Do you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
This may have very easily been averted had they employed their facial recognition.
Well, we know that facial recognition does not have a wonderful record of success. Like so many of these other high-technology whiz-bang things the government wastes billions of dollars on. But the whole point of the police on the ground and the lockdown and all the rest of it was to sell the idea to America that this kind of thing is necessary to keep them safe. And they're out there trying to basically say, oh, the Bostonians didn't have a problem with this. We applaud the Bostonians for going along and doing as they were told. And, of course, what we're hearing from people inside Boston is, no, they were not at all happy with this stuff. We're even getting word now that just like in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, the police and the National Guard and everything were confiscating firearms. When they were searching private homes, supposedly for these dangerous terrorists, they were confiscating guns.
Right. I don't doubt it. And one other issue, Michael, before I lose my train of thought, it wasn't just the one images of the day of the marathon. I mean, again, they were out there on Facebook, college IDs. I'm sure they could have resurrected some other photos to not just rely on just the ones from the day of the incident. And the feds have their databases. I mean, you know what kind of databases they could access to make a comparison. And, well, it just wasn't done.
No, well, it wasn't done. Again, this is just a very expensive theatrical production. It's wagged the Tamerlan on all of America to say, oh, bad Muslims, be afraid here. We, the government, will come to save you. And they basically pour on in there. They lock people in their homes. They shut the entire city down, and they're trying to sell everybody, this is necessary. You're just going to have to get used to this if we're going to keep you safe from those evil Muslim bombers.
It does one more item, quick, Michael. It does mention in the article the FBI, which declined to comment about the use of such technology in the Boston case, ultimately turned to the public in its quest to identify two key bombing suspects. Even though it later turned out that one of them had a driver's license photo on file in Massachusetts, one of at least 30 states that uses facial recognition software to analyze its database of motorists.
Yes.
So there you have it.
Yeah, no, the whole thing was theater. I mean, first of all, look at the media focus on Boston. Only 3 people died there, compared to the fertilizer plant explosion in Texas that killed 12 people, wounded far more, destroyed far more property. That got a blip, and then it's already gone. The focus is on Boston because that can be used to demonize Muslims and call for more war. In fact, I was just watching the corporate media, and they're back to saying every Muslim ought to be under complete video surveillance. We can't trust them, which, by the way, was exactly the same tactic the Nazis used against the Jews. We've got to watch all the Jews. They're evil. We can't, and the same thing all over again. Now, let me put that in context. When a white person robs a bank, or let's say a white CEO loots his own corporation, defrauds his investors, do we go out there and say we've got to have surveillance on all white people? No, of course we don't. If a black man steals a car, do we see the corporate media going out there and saying we've got to keep all the blacks under surveillance because of this car theft over here? We know there is a pandemic of child sexual molestation within the Christian churches and other churches too. Let's be fair; it's hitting them all. Should we keep all Christians under constant video surveillance for the children? No, of course not. The whole point of this exercise is to keep America demonizing Muslims, you've got to hate the Muslims. You've got to hate who we tell you to hate. You're not allowed to love anybody we don't tell you to love. That's basically what it's all about.
And in addition, it sounds a little bit racist to me. But
of course it's racist.
I know.
But it's acceptable because they're Muslims. They deserve it.
I know.
That's basically what it is. They're making racism socially acceptable in the United States of America. Okay, I'm going to take a call out of sequence there because Ryan Dawson is on the line, and I'd like to grab him first. Ryan, aloha, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Yeah, as you were saying, remember the D.C. snipers, they didn't shut down the cities for that, and they killed a lot more people than the 2 in Boston allegedly did.
Yes.
But I wanted to point your listeners to something that Justin Raimondo wrote called Who is Misha? I think everybody needs to read that. It goes more in line with what I was saying yesterday and what you reiterated today with the Oswald analogy. Very interesting in what Laura Rosen tweeted, and all of the things have been deleted already, the pictures of Misha. And we do have a video of them, but get it now before it's gone.
Okay. There's a lot of stuff. I mean, the hacker attack on my own website server, I can just smell panic in the air from the people behind this propaganda hoax. They realize it's crumbling. They have definitely lost the trust of the American people and the people of the world. Foreign media is already saying, yep, it's an obvious false flag, one of the most obvious the U.S. government has ever pulled off.
Yeah, people in Japan are like, whatever. I mean, this has changed more times than the We Shop in Laden story, as the Bell pointed out.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's like every day it's a new story. No, this is what you believe. Pay no attention to all the mistakes and lies from yesterday. That's yesterday. You've got to focus on what we're telling you today. And we've got Obama out there saying, really, just you don't look at anything out there. We'll investigate and we'll tell you what to believe. They've even gone as far as to launch what appears to be a phony warning that any emails floating around with unofficial videos and photos of Boston are all containing malware. If you dare open a picture that's not approved by the U.S. government, your computer will be destroyed, so don't click that mouse button. That's how scared they are out there.
Well, the cops have killed more people than these terrorists did. That's in Boston or any city.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, the number of people actually killed by terrorism in this country is microscopically small. More people are being killed by drunk.
Cops are terrorists.
Well, I think a lot of people would agree with you on that one. But you're far more likely to die from your doctor screwing up than you are from a terrorist. Should we keep all doctors under surveillance?
Of course not.
All right. Anything else, Ryan?
They just want to be like the UK and sell more camera equipment and more bells and whistles.
Oh, yeah, the security companies.
I'll reiterate. Who is Misha? Check it out before it gets down on Google and starts saving these images and things too.
Yeah, I've got it. You just put it up at whatreallyhappened.com. It's already on the front page, so people can look at that. And yeah, the security companies are having a field day. They're selling cameras and scanners and bomb detectors, like the golf ball detector that guy in Great Britain was buying for $20 each and reselling to the armed forces as improvised explosive device detectors for $40,000 a pop. They're just out there for
$300 million. They spent $300 million in Boston to find a guy who was bleeding to death. One bloodhound could have done it, but instead of getting the dog, they get a helicopter with thermal vision and all this junk. $300 million and going just to hell.
Yeah, and he was found by a neighbor lady out there in the backyard with a glass of wine, enjoying the evening, and she spotted him. That was it.
Exactly. This money. How serious were they about this? They're serious about spending the money, I'm sure.
They're serious about selling to America the need for this kind of Gestapo tactics. If you're a real American, you will let us into your home without a warrant, and you'll let us go through all your personal possessions and take your guns, or the terrorists will win.
Well, they got to shut down Chicago next time there's a murder, which will be tomorrow, probably.
Yeah.
They're going to do that. There's murders in every city all the time.
It's
but
theater.
They don't put all this effort in to catch those people. I know.
It's just propaganda theater. All right, Ryan, we're running out of time in this segment. I got a couple of other phone calls I got to get to. Thank you very much for your contributions to my website and my radio show. And we're going to switch over to Barry in California. Aloha, Barry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I'm calling you on my lunch break. I'm not allowed to listen to your show on my phone. You just took that privilege away. But anyways, you know about the lady that called into WEEI. It's a sports station. The day after they got the older brother, and what she saw, they heard this commotion. She was at her boyfriend's house. I can't remember what street it was or what part of the town, but they were picking him up, the older brother, the police. And all of a sudden, this black Suburban or SUV pulls up. They take him out of the cruiser, and they made him stand in the front of the street, and they ran him over with the SUV, and then they shot him multiple times.
Yeah, we heard that phone call. There was a tape of it and everything. Now we know beyond a shadow of a doubt the naked man who was shown alive getting into the police car in perfect health was Tamerlan. Comparison of his martial arts photos and the guy who was on that videotape, it's obviously him. The propagandists were out there trying to say, oh, no, that was actually the driver of the hijacked car, but we now know that driver was Chinese. That didn't appear in the American media, by the way. That was out there in the British press where they put out that little piece of information. So the guy who's in the video can't be the driver of the hijacked car. It's obvious he is not Chinese. And so it's another one of these many lies that have already been exposed.
If you'd like, I can send you that podcast. It's like 7 minutes long.
Yeah, if you would send that along, and I'll make sure it's got a permanent home at whatreallyhappened.com.
And one other thing, Mike, I think one of the biggest things of why they did this, they supposedly used, gunpowder in these bombs?
Yeah.
And now they want to take the gunpowder away from us so we can't make our own bullets?
Yep. Except that that's now going to backfire because now they're claiming that Tamerlan bought $200 worth of fireworks at a New Hampshire fireworks store. And if he paid cash, how do they know it was him? It's another loophole in the story. So now the gun grabbers have to back off banning reloading supplies because that is not what was used in this bomb.
Well, I just want to say one thing, Mike. When it comes to stuff like this, I turn to you and listen to you on the archives, and I turn on to my friend, and you've got another believer.
Well, thank you very much. I hope
you and others on RBN.
Well, thank you very much, but please don't believe. Analyze.
Well, no, that's what I mean.
Okay.
He's checking it out.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, I get chills when I hear the word believe because that is so often used to enslave people. Obama's out there saying, believe the government when we tell you who the bad guys are. Believe your bankers are honest. Believe your politicians are not corrupt. Believe the corporate media is telling you the truth. And, of course, we know that's nonsense. The corporate media lies about everything except the sports scores and the weather, and they're not even very good on the weather. So thanks a lot, Barry. We're going to let you go and switch over to Bill in Missouri. Aloha, Bill. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I was wondering I saw that Boston Globe retweet of the Boston PD Twitter feed that said they were going to have a controlled explosion on the 600 block of Boylston Street.
Yes.
Has anyone else confirmed that?
Yeah, actually the Boston Globe is acknowledging those tweets did come from them, but they're hemming and hawing over just exactly how they appeared in their feed. And, they're sort of like not allowing anything further, but they did confirm those tweets did come from the Boston Globe. Their Twitter account was not hacked. There was more than one of them, in fact, talking about the a controlled explosion across the street from the library. And by the way, across from the Boston Public Library is exactly where one of these two bombs went off. And then there was the other one that had the address of Boylston Street. So, yeah, that's confirmed. Those were real.
I've been trading emails with one of the Boston Globe reporters trying to kind of figure out what's going on there. And he's admitting, yeah, it did, and he's admitting, yeah, there was an explosion, but now he's kind of tiptoeing around saying, well, that controlled explosion was long after that terrorist attack.
There were no controlled explosions after the terrorist attack. I mean, they're grasping at straws out there. Nobody's going to set off.
It's kind of interesting that they did it. Now they're dancing around the timeline, basically.
Let me ask you a question. Let's say that you're there on Boylston Street. These bombs go off. And by the way, did you notice that these bombs went off after most of the people had already finished the marathon and the crowd was starting to leave? So these bombs go off and you're dealing with wounded and injured people. Are you going to go ahead and have a practice bombing? No, that's nonsense. It is simply beyond belief. Obviously, with all the mess that needs to be dealt with, anybody who's in charge of that is going to say, okay, the bombing drill is off. We got to go put bandages on the wounded people. So they're grasping at straws. I just wanted to make sure
that somebody had actually followed up on that and they had admitted it. So.
Yes, they had. And this idea that, there were controlled explosions after the actual bombing is ludicrous. They are grasping at straws trying to hold this Charlie Foxtrot of a propaganda story together.
I have the series of emails from Todd Wallach at the Boston Globe, so if you want to see those, I can forward those on.
Okay, I appreciate that.
All right, thank you.
All right, you got it. Now, okay, we're coming up on a commercial break. We will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're going to finish up on this Boston thing because there are other important stories that we do need to be covering that you need to know so you can make some good choices out there. But a couple more things I want to mention in passing. Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick has been all over the media talking about this chilling video of the bombers actually planting the bombs in those black backpacks. Although, of course, the younger brother's backpack was white. But when challenged on this, Governor Patrick admitted he hasn't actually seen any video. He was just told about it by the FBI. And, of course, Governor Patrick would never, ever doubt the word of the FBI. We know that these people are incapable of lying. We're hearing about all this stuff coming about Zokar, who's still in the hospital. They upgraded his condition to fair. His Israeli doctor is saying he may never speak again. gosh darn, nobody will ever be able to ask him to speak in his own defense and own behalf. But of course, we're already being told, oh yes, he's confessed. No problem, he's confessed. He's lying in bed, juiced out on morphine. He's got a trach tube down his throat, and we're being told, oh yes, he's confessed to all of this stuff. No lawyer present. They're trying to make a big deal about, his Miranda rights. And that's something they're going after. Oh yeah, that old right to silence, right to an attorney thing. Yeah, we have to let that go in the interest of, security, but we don't need to worry about it. He has confessed. So did James Earl Ray, if you'll remember. On the advice of his government-supplied lawyer, James Earl Ray confessed to the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King and then immediately recanted when it became obvious that the promised leniency the lawyer told him he was going to get wasn't going to happen. And then, of course, from that day until James Earl Ray died in prison, the FBI fought tooth and nail against any ballistics tests on the rifle that James Earl Ray supposedly used to kill Dr. Martin Luther King. There was one test, and it showed that the rifle that was planted on James Earl Ray had a manufacturing defect that left a deep gouge on every bullet fired through it. And that gouge was not present on the bullets recovered from the body of Dr. Martin Luther King. And the FBI said, oh, well, obviously the rifle wasn't prepared properly. And it went in the court system, and it just sat there on appeal and appeal and appeal until James Earl Ray died. And then the judge said, nobody else has standing to challenge this in court any longer. The official story is the official story, and that will be that. And, in the hindsight of that whopper about Saddam's weapons of mass destruction, the government's credibility is zero. We shouldn't even be listening to them. I'm already seeing these videos out there calling for a boycott on the corporate media. It's a waste of time to watch them, and that's absolutely true, and it's nothing but lies anyway. And we already know people have turned off the corporate media anyway. Their ad revenues are at all-time lows. It's just a complete disaster for them, and this is just going to make it worse. We've got the lion's share of the audience, according to Rasmussen. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show, and of course a lot of people are now coming forward to say they're not buying this story in Boston. It's too full of holes. We've caught them with too many lies. All this talk about, don't look at anything other than we show you, and now they're starting to blame the independent media and websites, and they're reacting to us. They've lost the initiative, which means they're losing the war for the minds of America. And of course, my concern is that just as was the case with TW-800, when too many people were coming forward to say they'd seen a missile rise up out of that ongoing Navy exercise off Long Island and kill TW-800, and they couldn't control that story. Boom! Olympic Park bombing, and the media's off on the new disaster. They may be considering something like that right now. A bigger, bloodier, messier false flag to make everybody forget about the obvious fraud we're seeing here in Boston. Yesterday we reported how a candidate for governor of, I think it was Nevada, has gone public saying he doesn't believe the official story. Now we have this ex-British diplomat is out there going public saying he's questioning the official story on Boston. And he's saying simply the scenario is simply impossible in the real world, and he's absolutely right. And everybody is grabbing this thing, trying to take advantage of it. Everybody's overreacting to it. The Kentucky Derby is now going to ban backpacks. And they're just trying as hard as they can to be afraid, leave your backpacks at home. Boy, if you've got stock in a backpack company, you better sell it right now, because they're going to get hammered with this fraud. We're going to grab some phone calls here. Lewis in California. Aloha, Lewis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Thanks for taking my call. I just have a comment and a question, and I'll get off the line and let you comment. Like you mentioned before, these guys at Boston, they just showed up at this without any disguises. I mean, faces easy to recognize. Now, here's my thing. I have a younger brother, and my instinct as an older brother is to protect my younger brother. So they're going to tell me that this guy just let his brother show up at this thing without any disguises at all. I mean, I would have said, hey, bro, you better at least put on a hat or something, or a mustache or some glasses. Nothing. Just let him show up like that.
The younger brother was wearing a baseball cap, but it was turned around backward with the visor on the back. It was like, take my picture, please.
Exactly. I just don't buy it that his older brother would just let it show up like that. That's my comment. And my question is, do you think there's any significance to the fact that at the end of this thing, this kid ends up in an Israeli hospital? Anyway, Mike, I'll get off the line and let you comment on that.
Yeah, a lot of people have commented on that. He was taken to this Beth Israel, and I forget the rest of the name. His doctors are all Israeli. Come on, guys. You know, why not put up a flashing neon sign saying guilty, 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 guilty? Because we know American intelligence agencies and Israeli intelligence agencies work together. They did it on 9/11. Remember the dancing Israelis who were there, and they were high-fiving and cheering as the buildings came down. Very inappropriate behavior, and they got arrested because too many people were calling the cops and saying, you got to get these guys. And they were very quietly shipped back to Israel, where they said on Israeli television their job was to document the event. And remember that 4-part story on Israeli spying by Carl Cameron on Fox News? A U.S. government official admitted there was evidence linking these arrested Mossad agents to 9/11, but it was classified by the United States government. So they work hand in hand with these things. They spread it around to increase deniability. Of course, as we're learning right now, it also increases the possibility of errors and exposures. Got to take a break. Back with more phone calls after these words from our sponsors. Welcome back to the show, and freedomforum.com just broke a story that Tamerlan Tsarnaev attended a CIA-sponsored workshop at the Jamestown Foundation. This is being reported out of Izvestia. And this Jamestown Foundation, it's another NGO, it's another CIA front in there messing around with other people's countries. So it's yet another indication that these two brothers were actually U.S. intelligence assets who were being used, you know, having come from that part of the world. They were sent back to that part of the world to carry out the will of U.S. government agencies. And then when it suited the U.S. government to simply throw their lives away in another plot, that's what happened. And again, for those of you listening to this show who are working for the U.S. government, keeping an eye on what we're saying, just think about that as you're trying to get to sleep tonight. Those people you work for have zero loyalty. They will throw your life away in a heartbeat if they think it will get them what they want. Back to the phones. Brian in Boston. Aloha, Brian. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Thank you. I just find it hard, Michael, that this carjacked individual has been able to remain anonymous. You would think that the mainstream media would be tripping over each other to trying to contact this man and get an interview.
Well, we've been told that he wanted his name kept out of the media, that he did not want to be talked to. Of course, now that we know through the British press that he was Chinese, obviously the FBI and the police and the corporate media have a reason to keep this driver hidden, because it makes it very obvious that he is not the naked man seen in the videos.
Oh, absolutely. That's correct. It kind of reminds me of the Benghazi incident, where you got this alleged filmmaker in California making a film that enrages Muslims in Libya only, I guess. And, I mean, this guy was arrested for bank fraud, check kiting, and did time in a penitentiary in the U.S., but there's no mugshot of this guy to be released?
Yes. Isn't it amazing? And by the way, that the movie was never actually made.
You shots on local news every night, Michael.
Yes.
You know, so it just goes. When will the people wake up?
I think they are. I think they are, and that's why we're seeing the people who are behind this propaganda about Boston. They're wholly reactive. They're wholly defensive now. They're trying to come up with a new story to tie all the loose ends together, and they're flailing about. And I think
the part that I find nauseating, Michael, is that the streets are lined with people. After they caught this youngest brother, the streets were lined with people, like maybe 5, 6, 7 deep, applauding the police as they're retreating back to the different towns and cities, whatever, and waving American flag. It's like, come on, the sheeple are out in force.
Yeah, isn't that funny? With all the stores around there closed, and yet this crowd seemed to have plenty of American flags to wave. That tells you right there. Somebody was there with a van handing out the flags. It was a rental ruckus. It was a rental crowd. I mean, that's been done before.
I just want to say that you and Deanna and John are doing a great job for all of us and keeping us informed. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we're going to switch over to John in Montana. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Much. Good talking to you again. I just there's a Fox update now that, of course, they're blaming the firecracker stands now because the guy had purchased fireworks, and now the remote control little cars that people have could have been used to sit off, and I mean, they're just starting to lay blame on everybody.
Yeah, they are. They're trying to basically, shut down everything that might be used by the American people against a federal government attack. I've noticed all of a sudden those little helicopters in the shopping malls have gone away. Ever since we talked about how easy it would be to use one of those to take down a drone, now they're gone from the malls and the stores. It really is ridiculous. Now, I want to talk a little bit about fireworks. This idea that you can buy packaged fireworks and take them apart and make explosives is nonsense. Anybody who tries is asking to lose a finger. And I know this because many years ago, before the computer animation revolution came along, I briefly worked in special effects in Hollywood. Now I used to work in visual effects, computers, dancing dinosaurs, and so forth. But but I briefly worked in the special effects, which are the on-set effects with explosives. I had a powderman's license for the lower level stuff to work with. If you take a firework, you will see that the propellant is in there with a bonding agent. It's not just powder, like you could get from bullets when you take the actual slug off the top of a bullet. There's a powder in there. Fireworks are made with a bonding agent to keep them stable during shipping. And if you try and sort of break it up and chip it, it will detonate. And so this idea that they made the bomb out of fireworks, and again, they're claiming he paid $200 in cash for fireworks. How do they know it's him if it's a cash transaction? Where's the paper trail?
Yeah. Well, I seismographed for years, and I was a powder monkey also, and and did shots and shot holes, and and the 5-pound puds of the bentonite and the primacord, and I'm kind of experienced with a little bit of that. And when they're saying it was black powder, that's what they're getting around to getting our guns again. No more black powder for reloading, and and it's flash powder that you use.
That's true.
Yeah, any way they can get in our back door, that's what they're trying right now, Michael.
Which is amazing because black powder is a very narrow market. It's for historical recreationists. And even a lot of people who shoot quote-unquote black powder don't use black powder because it fouls the gun. It's very corrosive. They use a modern smokeless simulant like Pyrodex. And so banning black powder, it's a very narrow niche market. And by the way, the last time I bought black powder, I had to show my ID to get it. They made a record, so it's already being tracked.
Yeah, and if you want to, you still can go buy canisters of it instead of unrolling a bunch of firecrackers.
Yes, that's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. And again, black powder is not the sole propellant in those fireworks. And again, there's a bonding agent. It's a solid mass in there. It's not just a bunch of powder. And if you try and break it apart, it'll detonate. And so, folks, please do not follow these bogus instructions in these so-called Al-Qaeda handbooks. They will not work. And they are very, very dangerous. I remember years ago when the government was demonizing the patriot groups and the militia, there was a book came out called The Anarchist Cookbook, and it was all over the alternative bookstores, and it supposedly had all these recipes for making drugs and explosives, and as somebody who has worked with explosives, I can tell you those recipes were designed to blow you up in your garage so the media could say, oh, there's another anarchist here who destroyed himself with his own bomb making. Important safety steps, important chemicals for stability and control were left out of these formulas. They were literally written to cause accidents. So don't trust any of this stuff that you see out there that's, the government propaganda. That Anarchist Cookbook was as much a fraud as the Black Panther coloring book.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that Anarchist Cookbook, boy, that was, years and years and years ago.
Oh, and yet every corporate media person who wanted to demonize the Patriot movement, they'd wave it around and say, this is what they're planning to do. And it was another government-sponsored fake.
All right, well, I'll let you go. I got to go to work.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Have a good day. We're going to switch over to Tom in Pennsylvania. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
No, sir. Actually, I think I still have a copy of that Anarchist Cookbook, along with how to, don't get mad, get even, how to get anything on anybody, which, by the way, my old employer was the actual writer of that book, and he used Lee Lappin as the pen name, but nonetheless, I called about you were talking about the two guys walking around with their faces showing, no disguises. The more and more pictures and things I see of them, the more I'm convinced that they were not nervous. They weren't looking behind them to see if they were being watched or anything like that. I think they thought they were participating in this drill and may not even have known what they had in the backpack.
I agree with you. It's a repeat of the London 7/7 bombing, where they went out and hired Muslims to play pretend terrorists for the benefit of this drill that was going on, and those poor guys did not even know the bombs they had were real and not fake. One of them was a brand new father. Brand new daddies do not go out and commit suicide bombings. And
along with the hijackers at 9/11, I got a sneaking suspicion that they may have also thought they were participating in the drills that were happening on 9/11. And, they went down along with everybody else.
With 9/11, most of those named suspects turned up alive long afterwards. In fact, the government of Saudi Arabia sued the United States for defaming one of their pilots in their national airlines who was named as a suspect. Apparently, at least one of the airplanes, when they autopsied all the bodies and they did DNA tests to identify the remains to send back to the families, they found no Arab DNA anywhere on that plane. So patsies get framed, the government does it, it's just more of the same stuff.
The plane.
I'm sorry?
It may be that those people, the hijackers, they said may not have even been in the plane, that all these phone calls that supposedly happened may have been pre-recorded and just played out. I don't know. There's so, they lie so much, you don't know. It's like a little kid that cries wolf, and they lie, and when they finally do tell the truth, nobody believes them.
Well, that's why all this lying is going to come back, on the U.S. government, because if there was a real crisis or a real emergency, nobody's going to believe a thing they have to say. We have to take another break for commercials. Tom, stay with me. I want to respond to something you said when we come back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking with Tom in Pennsylvania. And Tom, regarding 9/11, we know there was a lot of communications fakery going on. We were getting all these stories about people on board these planes calling their friends and family on cell phones and saying, we're going to die, the Muslims did it. And, of course, it was immediately determined after that cell phones won't work from a passenger jet. If you're sitting at the gate, maybe, but everybody who had a cell phone, the next flight they took, they tried the same thing, could not connect with the ground. The cell system is not designed to just jump from cell to cell to cell that fast for an overhead aircraft. We also know, there's a possibility there were no hijackers at all, and the planes were being flown by remote control, because do you remember a guy named Dov Zakheim? Rabbi Dov Zakheim, he was comptroller of the Pentagon during the period of time when some $3 trillion went missing and unaccounted for. And by, an amazing coinkydink, not to be believed, the plane that hit the Pentagon hit the offices where the auditors were trying to figure out where all that money had gone. And Dov Zakheim, before he became comptroller of the Pentagon, ran a company that manufactured remote control systems for aircraft. So it's just all fakery and fraud. Tommy, you there?
Oh, yeah, I'm here.
Anything else?
After all that remote control, I'm sure you remember, it's hit the web again. I just told a friend of mine about it a week or so ago. He had never seen The Lone Gunman. And I remember that because I was an X-Files fan and a Lone Gunman fan, and I remember that first episode where they took over a plane by remote control and tried to fly it into the World Trade Centers. And that was 6 months before 9/11. So maybe we should get the Hollywood producers to run CIA and FBI instead of...
Many of them already are. CIA has a tremendous presence in Hollywood. They prop up the careers of those actors and directors and producers who will do the propaganda that is wanted, and anybody who won't toe the line loses their career. Gene Seberg, good example. I'm another. It has happened time and time again. As far as remote control of aircraft, that actually goes all the way back to World War II. So it's nothing new there. The systems are more sophisticated, but it's definitely established. And the rationale for developing these systems for civilian airliners was to be able to take control of them in the event of a hijacking and bring them into a safe landing. Nothing the hijackers could do, nothing the flight crews could do. You're heading on down to this airport and they're waiting to arrest you, and that's the end of that. But we know those systems are out there. Pilots do not like them. Pilots want to be in control of their aircraft, but they are out there. Anything else, Tom?
Yeah, I was in the Navy. I was aviation Navy, and we had control of aircraft for landing on carriers through telemetry. You know, we could bring in a plane that was disabled or whatever and land it on an aircraft. In fact, they were trying to devise that whole system to bring aircraft onto rolling carriers that were in the high seas or whatnot, trying to land a plane onto a rolling deck by computer control, which was a heck of a lot more accurate than a human. But yeah, I think you got it covered, though. So keep up the good work. I listen to you every day. I gave up on Alex Jones. So,
all right. Well, thank you very much for listening, and please tell all your friends and family about Republic Broadcasting. And we're trying to build our audience. Our audience is growing right now. We're looking at the numbers. They are definitely trending upwards. So we're reaching the crowd. Our demographic is dropping in age, which is a tremendous vindication for what we're trying to do there. Now, in the aftermath of all the screw-ups in this story about Boston, they're falling back on the old canard. Oh, it was a failure of intelligence. That's what they were telling us after 9/11. Oh, it was a failure of intelligence. Give us more money and more of your civil liberties, and we will keep you safe. Well, obviously, if you accept the official story on Boston at face value, none of that stuff worked. So are they out there saying, well, let's scrap Department of Homeland Security and scrap all the rest of this because it didn't work? No, they're out there saying, we must have more money. We must have more of your freedoms. You will not be safe until we have you living in a cage under constant video surveillance. And that won't work either, because the next time the government needs bloody shirts to wave at you to start a war, they'll stage another phony false flag attack. But the government is out there trying to recover from this embarrassment. And, lawmakers are out there, who dropped the ball on the Boston bomber? And basically they're saying it's a failure to share intelligence information. And now it's coming out that some agencies did somehow magically know this was going to happen ahead of time, but they just didn't make the appropriate phone call. The working theory here, again, is these two guys were recruited as U.S. intelligence assets, just like Lee Harvey Oswald when he was over in Russia, and then the government just sacrificed them as chips for another government plot. And so the Department of Homeland Security is trying to save face. Everybody's out there saying, what are we putting up with all this email reading and computer scanning and naked body stuff and crotch groping and stolen luggage and broken laptops at TSA if it's not really going to accomplish anything? And their answer is always, oh, we need to do more. We're not doing enough. Clearly, we are not doing enough. So the security industrial complex is having a field day. We've got the next generation scanner and the next generation gloves, and we buy our product and you will be safe. Hasn't worked so far. We'll be right back. America, welcome back to the show here, and I just got an email from somebody who lives in Boston who points out that to get an ambulance from the location where the younger brother, Zocar, was arrested at the boat, to get him to that Beth Israel Hospital, you have to drive right past Massachusetts General Hospital. So that's kind of interesting. Okay, why did they not take him to Massachusetts General? He would have been in critical care sooner. Why did he have to go to this hospital with all these Israeli doctors? So the story just gets curiouser and curiouser. All right, I need to wrap up on Boston. We're halfway through the show, and there's a lot of other things I need to get to here. They're now out there saying because of the 19-year-old Zocar in the hospital, trach tube, can't talk, and he's out, thrashing around his arms and whatever, they are now crafting a picture of his motivation. His guilt is presumed. You will believe us when we say he's guilty. And now they're saying the motivation. And the good news is at least they have finally dropped all that crap about they hate us for our freedoms. And they're saying that these two brothers were motivated to do the bombing because of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. But they have opened up yet another public relations disaster. I guess they realized nobody was going to buy. They hate us for our freedoms any longer because the government's taking our freedoms away to make us safe, supposedly. But now they're saying these two brothers were responding to America's wars against Muslims everywhere. And the American people are tired of all these wars. We're fed up. We're tired of all the money that went into them. We're tired of all the constant lies used to start these wars. We're tired of seeing our kids come home in these cheap metal boxes with these cheaper American flags made in China. And we're supposed to say, oh, they died for a good and noble cause. I don't think so. But most Americans, I think right now, after all these wars of conquest, if they actually believe the official story, and according to our online poll, 98% of you do not. But if you believe the official story, you're going to concede that the Tsarnaev brothers had a legitimate gripe. They had a reason to be angry with the U.S. government following more than 10 years of wars on Muslim nations, drone strikes into Muslim nations with which we are not officially at war, and of course support for Israel's aggressions against Muslims for decades prior to that. After all, if a foreign nation was dropping random bombs on Christians around the world, most people would want that foreign nation stopped one way or the other. In that context, the actions of the Tsarnaev brothers are not completely alien. They're somewhat understandable, bordering on heroic, like the French underground striking back against the conquering Nazis. Now, along with the events in Boston, the corporate media is waving around these arrests regarding this Canadian train terror plot. Proof that the Muslims are out to get us, blah, 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 blah. Apparently, the Canadians knew about these individuals. The Muslim community had been ratting them out, saying, look, these two troublemakers came in here. They're talking about bombs. They're talking about terror. We don't want them here. We think they're troublemakers. Will you arrest them? And apparently the Canadian police knew about these guys for months. And they wanted to arrest them, but they did not arrest them until now at the request of the American government. We've got to coordinate these things for maximum media impact and propaganda value, don't you understand? Meanwhile, Reddit has now officially apologized for accusing this missing student, Sunil Tripathi, as one of the bombers. And by the way, a lot of people sent me this guy's pictures and said, oh, it's got to be him, got to be him, got to be him. And I said, no, it doesn't look like him. And it turns out, no, it wasn't him. And sadly, tragically, they now have found a body in the Providence River that they think may be this missing student. So that story is now over. There is no question that citizen investigation of the official story is causing major headaches for the controlled media and the U.S. government. They're in absolute panic right now. By the way, apparently the U.S. government has just released a photo which they claim is from the video showing the younger brother planting the bomb. And the photo is also problematic because there's a backpack on the ground at the front of the crowd watching the marathon, and it is a black backpack. And we know from other photos the backpack that the younger brother was carrying was white. And there's also something else in there. If you look at this photo, it's very foreshortened because it was taken with a telephoto lens. But it's also very obvious. There's like 3-4 deep crowd at the barricades watching the marathon, and the younger brother is obviously behind them walking along. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to a major event where there is a crowd, like the Rose Parade or some other festival like that. You don't just walk to the front of the crowd, drop something off, and walk away. Nobody wants you to get in front of them. They've all jockeyed for position. They've been there for a long time to get that front row center seat. You just don't walk up there and get to the front of that crowd and then walk back. So already that photo that they're now putting out there to try and sell the story, it's got problems. Wrong color black pack, and the position is wrong. Last Friday, Obama's out there saying, don't form opinions on Boston attacks until we have told you what to believe. Don't jump to conclusions. Just like Bush was saying, let us not tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories about 9/11. Yeah. I'm sure inside the White House they're out there saying, why don't they believe us anymore? Because you lie like a dog. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, now there's this new computer security warning that all of the emails and web posts that are showing these other photos and videos of the Boston bombing, they're havens for malware. Don't you dare click on those pictures. Don't you look on those pictures or videos because your computer will be infected. So, I mean, they're getting really, really desperate out there. They are getting desperate. Now, I want to clear something up because a lot of people have been talking about Tamerlan's girlfriend and that he had a wife, and they were trying to use it to demonize him. Oh, he was married, but he had a girlfriend, too. Well, it turns out it's the same woman. She's identified as a girlfriend in some pictures and then as a wife in some others, but it is the same woman. And, of course, before she is your wife, she is your girlfriend. You don't marry a total stranger. Before I married Claire, she was my girlfriend. That's just how it works. And this wife, Catherine, her name is saying the same thing everybody else is saying. No indications these guys were into anything involving terror and bombing and so forth and so on here. Alrighty, let's see. One more thing, and then I'm going to move on here. Do you remember that Iranian bomb plot case down there with that used car salesman who was going to assassinate the Saudi guy, and that one just cratered? And it looks like Boston is heading for the same fate. Nobody is buying this one. My concern, and I'm going to repeat this over and over again. Remember what happened after TWA 800. U.S. Navy accidentally shot down a 747 during a test of the Aegis CEC anti-missile system. Not the first time it happened. The USS Vincennes, based on the same computer platform, accidentally shot down an Iranian passenger jet. These things happen. With the quality of product America is now developing, they happen more often. Now we're hearing that these new littoral combat ships, which the Pentagon already said don't really have enough weapons to be effective, don't have enough armor to really survive an attack, and now we find out they've got so many computer security holes in them that somebody could actually hack in over the satellite feed or even Wi-Fi or Bluetooth and take them over. So immediately after the U.S. Navy accidentally shot down TWA 800, they were trying to put a cover story in place. It was falling apart. At first they were saying terror, 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 and then they said, wait, the Navy was right out there. You're telling us terrorists sailed into the middle of a U.S. Navy training exercise, flipped off a rocket, and then succeeded in escaping. And the Navy tried to deny they were having the exercise, and then, of course, the NOTAMs came out, and the paper trail showing that, yeah, they really were out there conducting live fire exercises. And so that's when the story about terrorists disappeared, and it became center fuel tank, and everybody who saw a rocket was seeing the remains of the plane zoom climbing in the sky, and anybody who says otherwise was just drunk anyway. And that actually was part of the official story. Those people on Long Island were drunk. And Bill Clinton revoked whistleblower protection for everybody who was involved in the search and recovery operation out there. There's a giveaway right there and then. They even went to the point of having a fraud of saying there had been some unknown biological threat carried on the 747, and so everybody had to stay off the beaches of southern Long Island. And, they didn't want anybody picking up any wreckage that showed up that didn't belong to a 747. So a week later, when the TWA 800 story is falling apart and everybody's talking about it, everybody's talking about, yes, I saw a rocket come up from the surface of the ocean and kill that jet. Then there was the Olympic Park bombing, and the corporate media said, huzzah, huzzah, we don't have to talk about TWA 800 any longer. And they went off on that, and TWA 800 dropped off the corporate media screen completely. My concern is they'll do it again. This Boston fiasco is falling apart. It's crumbling faster than the U.S. Federal Reserve notes. And they may be thinking that the best way to get out of this mess is to have a bigger, bloodier, more horrific false flag somewhere else. So we're hearing all kinds of concerns about that happening. And remember, every time there's another one of these big, huge bangs, it's advertising that all this Department of Homeland Security and TSA and FBI and CIA really don't work. All this money on databases and the new airport Zorch and Scorch 5,000 full-body x-rays, they don't really work. It's just another way of shoveling money to political cronies. Michael Chertoff, head of the Department of Homeland Security, his orders all these scanners and gloves and swabs and everything that the airports have got to buy for Homeland Security. Then he resigns from public office and he starts a company, the Chertoff Group. What do? They sell scanners and swabs and gloves to airport security. The guy is rich, along with all of his investors, and they're laughing at you. And I'm sure their salespeople are out there right now saying, oh, you have last year's scanner. You've got to have the new improved scanner this year. So it's just a complete nonsensical situation. They're talking about the sequestration is now harming air travel in the United States because the FAA controllers that make sure planes don't run into each other over the skies of America are having to be put on furlough. Why not put the TSA on furlough? In a decade of operation, they have not ever actually caught a real terrorist. Not once. Not once. Not once. But they'll grab your crotches. They've actually found pedophiles are applying for work at the TSA, so they can find the little children all day long. Isn't it going to be great? And, of course, huge scandal. They're looting luggage. They're helping to smuggle drugs. And the rest of them are butterfingers that drop and destroy your laptops, for which I never received an apology, let alone a replacement. All righty, we're going to go on to the economy now because there's a lot of other things going on, and unlike the corporate media, I don't want to do Boston, Boston, Boston all day here. Apparently, the former CEO of CME, Leo Malmed, tried to basically collect on 2 of his gold futures contracts, and he was refused. He had a contract for delivery on the 2nd of April, and apparently the physical delivery is being refused. All they'll give him is a warehouse receipt to say, see, your gold is there. You don't need to take it home with you. You don't want to have that old yellow, smelly metal stuff around your home or your own safe or vault or garage. Here's a paper that proves you own that gold. Jim Sinclair is out there saying that physical gold is now being cypressed. In order to cover the bullion shortfalls at the central bank, they're simply grabbing gold anywhere they can. But here's a warehouse receipt, or here's a big stack of freshly printed Federal Reserve notes. You don't need that real metal. It's useless. It's too soft to be used for any. You don't want that stuff here. Real Americans will take the printed paper. If you demand your physical gold that you own, the terrorists will win. Going to grab a phone call here. Malcolm in Austin. Aloha, Malcolm. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Sorry for switching topics on you. Someone just pointed this out, and I just wanted your opinion on this. That recent Internet Snoop bill with the Internet tax that just was introduced. Mm-hmm. Is it possible? I mean, the things that are going on in Boston right now, it's a fiasco. It's almost like they're saying we're doing a false flag, and this Internet bill that allows the money junkies to get a piece of our action via the Internet gets into Congress while everyone's looking at that. Do you think this was bait and switch?
Well, I think certainly when you have an incident like this, everybody tries to use it to the advantage they can. You have people blaming right-wing conservative Christians. Now they're blaming blogs like mine. Everybody, Israel's blaming the Muslims. Everybody's trying to use this for their own agenda, and there is no question that the people behind CISPA want to use this at least as a distraction. Now, CISPA did pass the House. Apparently, it is encountering opposition in the Senate, and but again, the idea is right now the power structure. The federal government, the Federal Reserve, certainly, they are scared to death of the independent media and the Internet. Remember, the Internet was never supposed to be a public utility. It was originally set up for the government's own personal use through DARPA. And it was originally called the ARPANET. And then as it started to go public, ARPA came into all these corporations that were running the backbone servers for the net, and they said, well, we're going to give you a check for another year's funding, but here are some rules as to who is going to be allowed to use this, and ordinary Americans are off the list. And fortunately, all of those corporations running the backbone said, well, you can stick your funding where the sun don't shine, we'll cover the cost from now on. In hacker lore, it's called the Great Revolt, and that's when the ARPANET became the Internet. And now the government's trying to figure out how they put the genie back in the bottle. Because this idea of ordinary Americans able to communicate en masse to fellow Americans is a huge, huge threat. That's why people didn't fall for 9/11 or for the rest of it, or Saddam's weapons of mass destruction. We've got to take a break here. Malcolm, stay with me. I'm going to come back to you. And aloha, America. We're talking with Malcolm in Austin, and we're talking about this obvious fiasco in Boston. And it's just falling apart very, very rapidly, but everybody's trying to take advantage of it. They're trying to ramrod this CISPA bill through, which would basically end all privacy online. We are watching you. Don't say anything we don't approve of. It's wrapped supposedly in the veneer of stopping online piracy, which online piracy is wrong, but it is tremendously overinflated as a real threat. The reason the music industries and the entertainment industries are in financial trouble is because they're not really coming out with anything new and interesting people want to look at. It's all politically correct recycling. I was talking with some friends the other day about how if you go to cable TV, it's all reality shows and repeats. There's hardly anything new out there because they've lost their audience, which means their ad revenues have to go down. Right now, corporate-owned newspapers, their advertising revenues are the lowest they've ever been since they started keeping records in the 1950s. Last time I went down to one of the network affiliates to work on a TV commercial for them, it was just this barn filled with empty, vacated offices. They're falling apart over there. Anyway, a little wrinkle about CISPA. Apparently, Representative Mike Rogers' wife is going to personally profit if CISPA passes, because she's out there already getting ready to sell the services that enforcement of CISPA is going to need. How very convenient. This is one of the reasons why when I talk about the blueprint for the new America, we need to have all elected and appointed officials' wealth in a blind trust, like they're supposedly doing for the president now, although we know presidents evade that. They certainly did during the Clinton administration, during the Whitewater hearings. It came out that the Clintons had a filing cabinet in the residence portion of the White House with personal financial papers. So they put some of their wealth into the blind trust, and they kept the rest of it so they could do insider trading, the way we know Congress is doing. And I think that was the real motive for the murder of White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster, because he was supposedly doing the blind trust declarations. He knew they were fraudulent. He didn't want to put his name on there because he could go to jail. And so he was going to resign from the White House. That would have brought more attention to the blind trust, which was already 6 months late. And so he was killed. They dumped his body in Fort Marcy Park. And some unknown party completed the blind trust declarations 3 days later. So, on and on. Anyway, Malcolm, what else do you want to talk about? I guess Malcolm hung up. Now then, Jim Grant over at Extra Public TV, there's an interview there. The Federal Reserve is not ending quantitative easing. In fact, as he puts it, they're doubling down. They're accelerating the printing and creation of new money for Wall Street to grab and go on out and play the stock market. That's the only reason the stock market is up. Lots and lots of cheap money coming in to play speculator games to try and keep that whole pyramid going. Just one more day. Please, just one more day. We'll be right back after station identification. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 3. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. And continuing on with the economy, yesterday the stock market had a huge dip in the middle of the day. And it was attributed to somebody hacking into the Associated Press Twitter account and sending out news that there had been a bombing at the White House and President Obama was injured, and it just sent the market plunging. Now it's being claimed these were Syrian hackers. Why? Did the government trace the IP address of whoever hacked the AP Twitter account? No, 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 no. There was a convenient phone call. Somebody called up and said, hey, the Syrian hackers, you know, try and find us, you schmucks. I'm sorry, you infidels. Now, obviously, there was a huge amount of volume on the market during that down spike and subsequent rise up when it came out that this was a fake story. What I want to know is who bought high, or rather who bought low and then sold high. Because anybody who knew that that was going to happen ahead of time could have made a huge chunk of cash in a very short amount of time. I'd like to see that being investigated. Oh, no, no, we've got to go after the Syrian hackers. Pay no attention to all this other money-making going. Remember all the short selling of airline stocks ahead of 9/11? When these staged incidents happen, people make money off of them. We're going to grab another phone call here. Henry in London, Ontario. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. How are you doing? I was just watching a video. It's kind of an obscure site called Alien Scientist, and he went through the 4 guys with backpacks and basically picked off, if you go to the Massachusetts National Guard, they're there. Like, there are 4 guys that are dead on for those 4 guys with the backpacks.
The Black and Tanners.
Yep. So it should be really easy to track these guys down.
Yeah, but the government doesn't want to look for them. The corporate media doesn't want to look for them. They've been told what the official story is. It's Muslims, Muslims, Muslims. Same thing we got on 9/11.
The alternative media should be able to pick them off. They're right on the front page of their webpage.
Well, let me tell you a little story. Years ago, I mean, I got into this whole blogging, talk radio, peace activism thing entirely by accident back in 1994 when I just was working in my little animation shop, and that picture of Vincent Foster's hand with the gun that was leaked by the White House to Reuters came on the air because people were... I'm sorry, what?
My dogs are barking.
Okay. And I'm probably going to have to take you through the commercial break on this one. And I looked at the picture, and because my profession at that time was fakery for Hollywood movies to make you convinced that you were seeing something that was real, I looked at that picture and I immediately knew it was a staged shot. There were all these things wrong with it. And I did a little bit more digging. I found the FBI's FD-302s in which they were trying to get Vincent Foster's widow to identify the gun found with the body as one belonging to him, and it wasn't. He didn't own a dark blued metal gun. He had a silver-colored gun, nickel-plated, that he inherited from his father. And I had a lot of friends at the networks and the network news departments, and I went down there and I said, look at this information. There is some kind of a hoax here. And I was told to my face, we can't touch that. It will end our careers. And so we're probably seeing exactly the same thing in the corporate media with all of this exploding evidence about the naked guy was Tamerlan and the rest of it. Nobody in the corporate media is going to touch it because they want to keep their cushy, well-paying jobs. Got to take a break for commercials. Henry, stay with me. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Henry in London. And Henry, do you just want to sort of pick up where you were? What was your next thought?
Yeah, I just emailed you the 2 links. Basically, it's a video that was put out by a guy that basically ID'd the 4 guys with backpacks.
Yes.
As part of the Massachusetts National Guard. And it's pretty well dead on. Like, it's really hard to, like, say these are not the guys because it's off the front page of their web page. And they're just pictures of them. So it should be really easy to identify these guys.
It should be, but again, unless some citizens investigator can actually get their names and addresses so we can go talk to them, again.
Right. That's what I'm asking for. That's
all right. I'll put it up. I'll put it up at the website, and people can take a look.
One other point I'd like to make is there was a lot of reporting that there was training exercises going on at the beginning of it, and they were saying, oh, this is a training exercise, don't be worried, don't be worried.
Mm-hmm.
The start of races, there are so many cameras, there are so many video cameras. Someone must have that on video.
It's entirely possible, but I mean now they're basically, you know, they're refusing to neither confirm nor deny the drills, and we have all these eyewitness testimony. And like I said earlier in the show, the Boston Globe has acknowledged those tweets talking about controlled explosions as part of the drills did come from the Boston Globe. They were retweets of tweets they were getting from the police department. So this idea that there wasn't a drill, that's pretty much gone.
But I'd like to see a video of them actually announcing it.
Well, you know, we'll keep an eye out for that. But, you know, I would rather keep the focus on what are they using this for. And obviously it's to demonize the Muslims, demonize fireworks stands, demonize pressure cookers, demonize online blogs and independent media. And I really want to keep the focus on that because we have to sort of push back against the further encroachments on our civil rights.
Well, it's a total, like, police state in Boston. And that seems to be the purpose of the whole thing.
I agree that's a major purpose of it, to basically say this is what we must do to keep you safe, and huzzah, huzzah, the Bostonians went along with it. We applaud them for understanding the necessity, and of course talking to real people in Boston. No, they don't. They were very angry, especially now that we're getting confirmation that these intrusions into the homes were confiscating firearms from people who did not have a criminal record.
It was almost like Georgia with the color revolution. You kind of wonder if there were a bunch of tweets going out to get everyone out in the streets to cheer and say USA, USA. Like after they caught the thing, the second.
I'm sure it was orchestrated. Like I pointed out, everybody on the crowd, they all had American flags that all looked more or less the same, and yet we know all those storefronts were closed, so somebody was there handing out flags.
Right.
Okay?
Great, thank you.
All right, we're going to let you go and switch over to George in Texas. Aloha, George. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, there was good news that came down from our local county grand jury. It was over a man assaulting a police officer. That was the charge.
Yes.
Assault of a police officer. Well, out in a county park, a police officer harassed this man's son, who is retarded, and tased him. The father said stop it, and he wouldn't stop it because this retarded person did not follow the commands of the officer fast enough. So the father pushed the officer to the ground and took his handcuffs and handcuffed, took his gun belt off and threw it in the trunk of the car and put the officer in the back seat of his car.
Mm-hmm.
And the grand jury just basically said to the police officer, how you use that taser was outside of policy. When you're outside of policy, you're no longer a police officer.
That's exactly right.
And the father only used just a minimal enough force to prevent him from doing any more harm.
That is such an important concept for Americans to understand. Okay? A police officer, or for that matter, a political official, hold that authority only when they operate within the limitations imposed by the law and the Constitution. When they act outside those laws, they are no longer police and political leaders. They're just ordinary citizens hiding behind uniforms, fancy suits, and a badge. And as a matter of fact, this goes all the way up to the United States Supreme Court in a decision called Marburg versus Madison, which said laws repugnant to the Constitution are automatically null and void. Right now, our government is taking the attitude of Obama's going to sign these executive orders and they are the law until the Supreme Court looks at them. No, that is not the legal precedent. They are not the law if they violate the Constitution automatically. That's the default.
Well, just like President Obama signs those executive orders, he ceases being president because his duties is to faithfully execute the laws of Congress, not his own political point of view.
That's exactly right. But getting back down to the street level, because we know there are police that are out there, they don't want to be videotaped doing what they're doing. They're taking cell phones and smashing them. Their new excuse now is, cell phones can be turned into weapons. Therefore, we're concerned you have a Tomahawk land attack cruise missile hidden in your cell phone. Therefore, we have a legitimate right to disarm you to save our own lives. And, of course, it's complete and utter nonsense. But when the police are operating outside the law, they're no longer the police. They're just thugs with guns and a Halloween costume. And you're absolutely right. If the police are not following the law, you have not only a moral obligation to resist, you have the legal right. And again, that comes from another United States Supreme Court decision, John Bad Elk versus the United States, where this John Bad Elk basically shot some police officers who were violating his civil rights. And the Supreme Court agreed, because those police officers were not in compliance with the law, John Bad Elk was legally justified in using force, indeed even lethal force, against them. So the law is on the side of those of you who want to stand up to the police.
Well,
that's why they want to take away your guns.
Well, this is the other thing on why this father assaulted. Another thing they said, the father has the moral obligation to defend his son, which was only 11 years. He was only 11 years old.
Yep.
And like I say, he was handicapped. He didn't understand. It's like he has an obligation. And the thing is, some of the police officers are kind of happy that this police officer got fired because he was making him look bad. Because there is some police officers that say that some bad apples do make the whole force look bad.
Well, they absolutely do. And, we know stories like Serpico and these others where there are people who join the police force out of a serious, genuine commitment to the community. We also know, unfortunately, sadly, that hiring by police departments is preferential to returning veterans from the war zone, ostensibly to help these veterans reintegrate into society, but they come in with this same war mindset that they had in the war zones, and we're seeing it in the way the American people are being treated. Plus, we have all these Israelis coming over to treat police departments on the best way to treat the ordinary people, which is why we're all being treated like the Palestinians now. So it's a very, very ugly situation. George, got to let you go. Running out of time. Got a lot of stuff I got to talk about here. Getting back to yesterday's dip on the stock market, which is being blamed on Syrian hackers only because somebody called up and said, "Hi, we're Syrians, come and get us." We're concerned, obviously, that as the Boston cover story continues to fall apart, that the U.S. government will attempt to distract from it with a new terror false flag, much as they did with the Olympic Park bombing when they couldn't keep the lid on TWA 800. One of the things they may be considering right now is a virtual 911, a cyber attack on the computers of America's banking system, to be blamed on Iran or Syria or Russia or China. Because this would allow the United States, first of all, the impact of this would be felt all across the country. Everybody would be having trouble going to the ATMs. Everybody would be short on cash. Everybody would be impacted by this. It wouldn't just be Boston, wouldn't just be New York. It would be the entire country coast to coast. And it would have the added advantage that it would allow the Wall Street money junkies and the federal government to completely duck the blame for having destroyed the economy with their little Ponzi scheme central bank. They'd come on out there and say, "We were just on the verge of turning the economy around. We had a plan that was going to restore America to economic greatness, and those gosh darn Syrian, Iranian, Russian, Chinese hackers, they destroyed our computers." And that would be it. They'd be off the hook. It was no longer a financial crash caused by corruption, crime, stupidity, bad assumptions. It's a dastardly act of war by those dastardly hackers. So they could be thinking that as well. We were seeing almost a run-up to that a while back with all these hacker attacks on celebrity websites. I've hacked into their celebrity and I've put pictures of them baking cookies on the net, which of course there's no financial return. So the only reason for somebody to be hacking the celebrity computer accounts is to attract attention, to generate media buzz. Oh, there's hackers out. There's Syrian hackers and Iranian hackers. And of course, we know the biggest hackers in the world are the Israelis. Now, this is a story that happened a few days ago. It's taken me a while to get to it. Over in China, in Kunming, Yunnan province, there is a woman who is suing the United States Federal Reserve because of quantitative easing having devalued the money she had in her account. She put the equivalent of $250 into an account in 2006. It has now shrunk by 30% of its value as a result of the Federal Reserve issuing too much money. Can you imagine the firestorm if Americans start doing exactly the same thing, suing the Federal Reserve for debasing the currency? And what if it became a class action? what a firestorm that would be. We'll be right back. Hello, America. Welcome back to the show here. And apparently John Boehner is refusing to allow a Congressional Select Committee investigation into Benghazi. Even though there is a huge amount of support in the House of Representatives for there to be a Select Committee investigation into just what happened over there, Boehner is saying, nope, we have the official story. We don't need to look any closer at what's going on. Of course, what I think happened is that Benghazi was supposed to be these terrorists, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, capture the ambassador, hold him for a few days, Obama gets him out, and he looks good for the coming election. And it got out of hand because all of the Libyans around there heard the gunfire, and they all piled on, and it just turned into a complete free-for-all. And now they're trying to recover from that embarrassment. Getting back to the economy, and speaking of the Obama administration, they are actually spending your tax dollars to go out and encourage, the word is actually recruit, more people onto food stamps. There is a lot of fraud out there in the food stamp program. And there are close to 50 million Americans on food stamps right now. Why are they going out and spending money to get more people onto this program funded by tax dollars? Because it makes them dependent. The goal would be for everybody in the United States of America to be getting a little paper ticket or a plastic card from the government in order to eat. Because when you reach that state, you won't stand up and say, hey, Boston was a fraud. I don't believe the official story. You won't stand up and say, these wars are wrong. You won't stand up and say, how come none of these bankers in Wall Street behind the mortgage-backed security fraud or LIBOR have been arrested, let alone thrown in jail? Dependency is slavery. And that's the agenda, to keep you dependent on the government for your food, or for the money for your food, to keep you dependent on large, giant food corporations for your food, to keep you dependent on private corporations for your water. Nestle is now out there lobbying, saying there is no inherent right to water. It shouldn't be a public utility. We will bottle and sell it at a profit, to keep you dependent on the privately owned Federal Reserve for your currency. Dependency, dependency, dependency is slavery. That's why on July 4th we call it Independence Day. We don't call it Kick the British Out Day. We don't call it Freedom Day. We call it Independence Day because that's the day Americans became dependent on themselves and were freed of their enforced dependency on the Bank of England, the British East India Company, the British stamps that they were required to have. That's why the Obama administration, even as they're screaming furlough, furlough for the FAA controllers, they're out there spending money to encourage more people onto the food stamp program so that they will not be able to stand up and say, we think the government is wrong. Now, I'm going to talk about guns just a little tiny bit. Predictably, gun and ammunition sales surged once again after the Boston bombing. Everybody understood somehow or other they were going to tie this into guns, banning ammunition, banning reloading supply. We've got to get all this stuff up there. And apparently there was a gun show in Syracuse over this last weekend. And it was a 2-hour wait to get inside. So that one sort of bashed up. We've been talking about how Biden is out there saying that Obama is going to use executive orders to impose his gun prohibition on the country. Forget about the Congress. I don't need the Congress. I'm the president. I can just do whatever I want. Kind of a strange statement from somebody who claims to have been a constitutional law professor. One of his first executive orders apparently is to ban the importation of ammunition, magazines, and gun accessories from outside the country. A lot of those products are made in other countries and imported here. Will probably be a boon for domestic manufacturers, but it's just another way of trying to shut down your access to your right to keep and bear arms, even as the U.S. government buys more hollow point ammunition. Department of Homeland Security is buying all this ammunition. They also were buying all these explosives not too long ago, just in time for the Boston bombing. Now, apparently down in Missouri, their director of revenue was forced to resign when it came out that he had turned over all of the state's concealed carry permit data to federal government agencies. They're trying to find out who's got the guns. We have to know which doors to kick down. Apparently they did in Massachusetts. Remember after Katrina? Natural disaster, hurricane and flooding. They're seizing guns from the law-abiding citizens. Same thing in Boston. It was a bombing. They were already out there saying these two Muslims did it, and yet these people, uniformed thugs going into these homes in Massachusetts were confiscating guns. Over in New Jersey, this is just how weird this is getting. This New Jersey mother went to a local tax meeting about property tax assessments getting completely out of control, and she read from the Constitution. For that, she was arrested for making terroristic threats and forced to surrender her legal weapons for reading the Constitution. Do you get that subtext? If you support the Constitution, you're a potential terrorist. Reading the Constitution is terroristic threatening. Getting a little strange out there in La La Land. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Up in Chicago, a former Chicago police officer working as an informant for federal investigators pled guilty on Monday to charges he sold firearms to a convicted felon. So here you have former cop, now he's a spook for the federal government, and he's selling firearms, plural, to a convicted felon. This is the reason gun registration and background checks won't stop the criminals. I've seen this pattern before. I used to see it in Los Angeles. The cops would find somebody with a gun on them, and they'd say, look, I can arrest you, or I'll just confiscate the gun and you can go free. So there was no paper trail of the encounter, and the cop would just keep the gun. Use it as a drop gun, or sell it. Just weird thing. Now, interesting story. Apparently, they're having these hearings in the Senate about the drone strikes. They're trying to basically get Obama to provide the legal constitutional justification for drone strikes that go into countries with which we are not officially at war, and for every one accused terror suspect for which there is no evidence proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, for every one of those suspects they kill, they're taking out an average of 50 innocent civilians with every single drone strike. No coverage on the American media about that. They're still going wacko about these 3 people who died in Boston, and I don't mean to trivialize their deaths and their injuries. But obviously the drone strikes are far more lethal. By the way, CNN is still going Boston, Boston, Boston. Fox News, not quite so much. MSNBC has already decided this is worn out. We're going. They're starting to cover more and more of the other news over there. So anyway, in this public hearing yesterday, the Senate Judiciary Committee heard testimony from 6 experts on the constitutional and counterterrorism implications of the covert U.S. drone program. And these panelists said the drone strikes are creating deep anti-American sentiments in the countries where they're taking place. My question is, these senators had to be told that? These senators don't understand when you send these random robotic death machines into other countries and blow up a bunch of innocent people? Those who survive are not going to be entirely cheerful about that. What did these senators think was going on? Oh, look, it's a drone. It just blew up Fred's house. Too bad, I was dating his sister. Let's go shoot some hoops or something. These senators had to be told that these drone strikes are creating anti-American feeling? Are they all on SSRIs up there? Just nonsense. Kerry is out there urging NATO to plan for Syria chemical weapons threat. And of course, we must send more money to the hired mercenary army. What's really amazing is, of course, Kerry is going on and on based on Israel saying we have proof Syria is using chemical weapons. But apparently when pressed for it, Netanyahu said, well, we can't actually confirm that. It's just a good guess. We saw it on the Ouija board, so forth and so on. over at antiwar.com, there's an article warning that the 200 U.S. troops now in Jordan could very quickly become 20,000 in advance of a Syrian ground invasion. They want Syria. And they're getting impatient. They've been trying to push this, oh, it's a civil war. Oh, it's a popular uprising. And it's not getting any traction. By the way, these Syrian rebels, the hired mercenaries, just blew up this ancient minaret at a famous mosque. They bombed the mosque last January, didn't get it all. They came back and got the minaret just today. That's kind of on the same level as somebody coming in and blowing up the cathedral in your town, to give you an idea of how this is. And again, it underscores the fact this is not a popular uprising. And again, how you determine what's really going on here is you go back to the American Revolution. Did you see Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and the boys running around the countryside burning colonial churches? No, the British did that on a couple of occasions. If these so-called Syrian rebels really represented a popular uprising against the government of Assad, they're not going to be blowing up their own mosques. It was an act of terror to terrorize the Muslims into supporting the rebels. And they've been caught with other acts of terror as well. So it's just, again, completely not credible that this is a popular uprising. We must intervene to save those poor Syrians from their cruel, evil tyrant. And put in a brand new U.S. puppet regime and a brand new private central bank. And see, I already talked about that, the cyber problems on that warship. Apparently an ex-Bush official, Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, who was chief of staff to former Secretary of State Colin Powell, is now willing to testify that George W. Bush and Dick Cheney knew that most of the prisoners being held and tortured in Guantanamo were in fact innocent of any wrongdoing. He's saying that Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld knew the vast majority of these prisoners kidnapped in this so-called war in terror were innocent, and the government refused to let them go because of the severe embarrassment it would be. Oh, we tortured innocent people. No, we enhanced, interrogated innocent people. And of course, now it's come out, yeah, it was torture. That bipartisan independent investigation said absolutely beyond a shadow of a doubt these people were being tortured. And according to Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld knew the vast majority of them were innocent of any wrongdoing. Well, you keep on waterboarding them. We'll get them to say they did something we can hold them for. Remember Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was waterboarded 183 times before he finally confessed to being the mastermind of 9/11. If I were to take any of you listening to this show and waterboard you 183 times, I could get you to confess to blowing up the Challenger, the Columbia, shoving the iceberg in front of the Titanic, shooting Kennedy and Lincoln, and personally nailing Jesus to the cross. Torture does not provide accurate, factual information. Torture is used to get politically expedient confessions. Europe, height of the witchcraft scare. They tortured women and some men. So finally the women said, please stop the pain. Yes, I'm consorting with the devil. That's all torture is good for. We need them to admit on TV they were guilty. And we have no idea what coercive means are being used right now on Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, the younger brother up there in Boston. He's in this Israeli hospital with Israeli doctors. Has not had a lawyer yet, supposedly can't talk, according to his Israeli doctor, will never talk. He just sits there and he nods or he shakes his head or he makes hand signals and they say, yes, did you blow up TW-800? And he goes, yeah, he confessed to it. That's it, he's guilty. Case closed. Nothing to see here, folks. Move along. Now, speaking of the TSA and the Department of Homeland Security and all these other agencies, which, if we believe the official Boston story, completely and utterly failed to protect us from an act of terrorism, and are complete wastes of taxpayer money at a time when they're furloughing the FAA flight controllers because of a lack of funds. TSA a while back said they were going to relax the attitude on pocket knives. You could now take your Swiss Army knife onto the airplane with you. which was never really dangerous. What are you going to do? Dismantle the plane? And let me get the wrench out and just unbolt something important here. Well, that decision is now being delayed. They weren't really backing off. They just wanted to look like it during a time when TSA was coming under increased criticism. So it's not really going to happen. Leave your Swiss Army knives at home. Which is a problem. I feel naked without my Swiss Army knife. My little MacGyver here. And, oh, there's a problem here. I'll fix that for you. Over in North Carolina, at a community college, they have been forced to pull one of their weekly radio political programs off the air. It's called The Rant. After North Carolina State Representative Mike C. Stone, Republican, objected to the fact that they were critical of him. You can't be critical of me in a college radio show. Now, the first time I ever took to a microphone was at college radio, back at Mount San Antonio College, KSAC, KSAK Radio. On a good day, our broadcast footprint might reach the outer edge of the student parking lot. So college community radio isn't really that big of the market share. But this state representative said, they can't criticize me. And ever hear of a thing called the First Amendment? Apparently not. If you talk about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, you are now a terror suspect. Turn in your guns. The United States Supreme Court has now barred all U.S. lawsuits against overseas human rights abuses. This overturned decades of precedent, ruling unanimously in Cubal versus Royal Dutch Petroleum. Foreign citizens subjected to human rights abuses in foreign countries cannot sue those corporations here in the United States. Amazing here. Let's see. Let's skip on down here. We're coming up on the end of the program here. Congress is looking at a new bill that will have the IRS automatically fill out your tax forms. When they mail them to you, they'll be pre-filled in with all of the information they're getting from your databases and your eBay statements and your employer's W-4 and everything. They're calling it the 1040 Super EZ. It's only got 3 questions on it. How much did you make? How much do you have left? Send it all in. Speaking of hacking attacks, and like I said, our server was hit with a denial of service attack earlier today. The United States government is still recruiting hackers to hack for the U.S. government, to go after those pesky alternative media sites, independent media sites, to go out there and shut down those videos that show things we don't want the public to see. And we have been reporting on this last week since the Boston bombing. Photos will go up, they get taken down. Videos go up, they get taken down. Posts to Facebook are being blocked. Remember, the fastest way to bring down a dictatorship is to force them to act like one where everybody can see it. And everybody's seeing it right now. Meanwhile, Secretary of State John Kerry, when he's not over there supporting Israel and the rest of it, he's out there screaming about global warming. And he's out there saying the science is screaming at all of us, and he demands action. We have to deal responsibly with the clear and present danger. He says he's out there that the fragile planet we share with the rest of humanity, which we must protect for future generations, apparently by bombing the crud out of anyone who dares sell their resources for currencies other than the dollar and who refuse the blessings of private central banks issuing the public currencies alone at interest. Mr. Kerry, I have something for you to think about. Science doesn't scream at people. Science doesn't need to. Propaganda is screamed at people. We certainly saw that this last week since Boston, with the corporate news media scream, Muslims, terror, blah, 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 blah. Science never screams at people. It doesn't need to. Meanwhile, of course, we've got this story from CollectiveEvolution.com about scientists are baffled as latest report proves global warming has stopped. Like everybody who didn't spend most of this last winter with a snow shovel in their hand didn't already know that. And the reporter on this story is saying, how many more years of stagnation are needed before scientists rethink their predictions of future global warming? Well, obviously, for any real scientists, they should have started rethinking that years ago. This is agenda-driven. Kerry's statement proves it. They're still out there pushing this global warming. You must pay carbon taxes. You must agree to a lower standard of living. to save the fragile planet Earth from you evil, icky poo human beings. By the way, latest NASA study has determined that carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, in fact, acts as a coolant. This whole greenhouse model works with a greenhouse where you have a solid pane of glass. But carbon dioxide is not a solid pane or a solid layer in the atmosphere. It's just blended in. And the latest NASA research trying to prove that carbon dioxide is leading to increased warming found exactly the opposite. But they're still out there for the carbon taxes and the carbon credits, and Al Gore and his buddies are getting rich off of carbon trading. And we're getting a warning. This is in The Guardian over in Great Britain. They talk about the carbon bubble. They're bubbling up, these carbon credits. We were talking the other day about how countries that have not signed the Kyoto Accords, who are pouring out all kinds of these CO2 emissions, and they're still printing up and selling carbon credits. It's free money for ink and paper. And The Guardian is warning there are trillions of dollars at risk because of stock markets inflating the value of these carbon credits. And the carbon credits are promises that we will leave these fossil fuels in the ground forever. And of course that's nonsense. The instant there's a shortfall in coal or oil, those reserved deposits, carbon credit deposits, they'll be tapped into. It's just another scam to take your money. Meanwhile, Poland has become the 8th European Union nation to ban GMO crops. You're not allowed to grow GMO crops in Poland. That's 8 of the European Union member states. They know these things are dangerous. Do you? Well, you do if you read the independent media, listen to Republic Broadcasting. You'd never know it coming from the American corporate media because, you know, by golly, Monsanto is a huge advertiser. And we can't risk losing those advertising contracts, especially as our audience shrinks and we have no money. So, of course, we've got to say whatever Monsanto tells us. And we saw that back with that Fox News synthetic bovine growth hormone lawsuit, where the reporters assigned to the story found that eating the dairy and meat products from the treated cows led to serious health problems. And Fox News ordered them to take that out, make it a puff piece for how great Monsanto is. The reporters refused and were fired. They sued Fox News for wrongful termination and lost on appeal when the court said, because there is no law requiring the corporate media to be truthful with the American people, the corporate media can order their journalists to lie to you, and if they refuse, they can be fired. Legitimately. So keep that in mind when you hear all this corporate media nonsense about Boston and backpacks and Muslims and the rest of it. They are legally allowed to lie to you, and reporters who refuse to do so can be fired. Just keep that in mind. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization is out there. The new bird strain is one of the most lethal flu viruses out there, so you just rush out and buy lots and lots and lots and lots of vaccines today or you're going to die horrible deaths. Same thing we saw back in 2009 with the When Pigs Fly flu. It's just another marketing gimmick masquerading as news. We'll be right back. We've drowned in fat. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We were talking about they're promoting the new flu virus. Run out and buy lots and lots of vaccines because we need your money here. There's a scandal brewing. This is reported over at consumerist.com, where it turns out the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, when they found out that the safety testing being done on pharmaceutical products by a contract research firm in Texas was fraudulent, they didn't do anything. They didn't pull the drugs off the market. See, the Food and Drug Administration, long ago when we had a government that was looking after the American people, the FDA did their own safety testing. And over time, the FDA, and for that matter, the USDA, have sort of taken the attitude, we trust the manufacturers to do their own quality assurance. We know they would never put a harmful product out there in the marketplace. And so the pharmaceutical companies will come up with a drug. They will hire an independent, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more, testing firm to conduct the research. And then they'll go to the FDA and say, see, we have this paper from this independent, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more testing firm that says it's safe. And the FDA says, all right, you're approved, put it out on the market. And, of course, we know a lot of drugs, once they're on the market, prove to be anything other than safe. And now it turns out the FDA knew that some of this testing work was fraudulent, and they didn't do anything about it. They didn't pull the drugs off the market. They didn't even slow down approving new drugs based on testing that came from that lab. It's all about the money. Now, there's an interesting little story. This came out of Mercola, where a girl was kicked out of school for refusing a chickenpox vaccine, even though, this was on Staten Island, even though the family's doctor had warned her against getting it because it might have hurt the health of her baby sister. Remember, there's a big problem with these vaccines. You may not become sick, but you become a carrier. You can infect other people. And so this little girl's family doctor said, don't do it. You could make your little baby sister ill. And the school kicked her out. You will have your vaccines. All your babies belong to us. Remember, over in Italy, the courts concluded that the MMR vaccine does in fact cause autism. Have you noticed all these other countries around the world, they're slowing down on the vaccines, they're banning GMOs. They understand these products coming out of America's corporations are dangerous. Absolutely dangerous. So are the SSRIs. Nobody wants to talk about those. We can't afford to lose those campaign donations and those ad contracts. Interesting little thing. You've probably heard this idea that, 50 is the new 60 and so forth to sell us the idea that we're healthier people. We aren't. The reality is today's adults are getting diseases normally associated with old age 15 years younger than their grandparents because of this chemical onslaught of our bodies. That's it for our show. We got to head on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, please tell all your friends and family your social media about Republic Broadcasting, about whatreallyhappened.com. Please share what you know about this fraud in Boston with everyone that you know. Keep spreading the word. We are winning the war for the minds of America. Aloha, America.